The Aurora Borealis, the Northern Lights. For some, they're just a natural phenomenon, a beautiful spectacle to watch in the night sky. But to others, their significance is much more. Some First Nation people believe that the Northern Lights are the spirits of their ancestors, dancing across the sky and trying to reconnect with the living world. For me, the Northern Lights has always been a bucket list item. For as long as I can remember, I've always loved to travel and adventure, and so when it came to planning this trip, I wanted to go somewhere that was incredibly remote that would give me the absolute best chance of actually seeing the lights. Now, I knew the further north that I travelled, the colder it would get, and the more remote it would get, but I didn't realise quite how cold or quite how remote.
In Churchill, it's currently minus 36 degrees. Due to current wind conditions, it feels like it's minus 53.
But isn't that just part of the adventure? My partner Shona and I set off from Vancouver to Churchill, a trip that would take almost 3 days to complete.
Shorts is a terrible idea. Oh my god, it's so cold.
This is final boarding call for Air Canada flight.
Now, with no roads in or out of Churchill, the easiest way to get there is by train. The train from Winnipeg to Churchill takes about 48 hours to complete. As we picked up our train tickets in the station, it was absolutely impossible to not be incredibly excited about what we were about to do. Imagining seeing the Northern Lights in person and just getting to witness something that has just been a dream of mine for so many years. As we settle into our home for the next 2 days, and with nothing but time to think, it really made us realise how fortunate we are and how incredibly lucky we are to be able to take a trip like this. With the busy life of the city now behind us, and with the vast Manitoba countryside ahead of us, we decided to settle in for the night. The following morning I woke up to the most spectacular sunrise, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of awe and humility. With no phone signal and no distractions, the world was just quiet and peaceful, and for a moment everything else just seemed to fade away. It was a reminder of the beauty that's all around us, and how sometimes we just need to disconnect from the world in order to reconnect with ourselves. As we closed out day 2 of our train journey, we began to leave the boreal forest behind. When dawn broke, revealing the subarctic tundra, we finally got a sense of just how remote this place was. Finally, after 48 hours of anticipation, we rolled into Churchill. A remote town that feels like it might just be the end of the world, but it's actually the beginning of a new one.
So good to meet you, Ollie.
A place where people look out for each other. And with Churchill being the polar bear capital of the world, I think that's pretty important.
So first of all, if we were doing this orientation and it was July or August, or especially October, November, I'd be doing a whole speech on polar bear safety right now. But there has been one sighting maybe a week or so ago. Somebody spotted a mom with 2 cubs.
Okay.
So as we get into March, there's a small element of danger. So in other words, just beware, but you shouldn't run into a bear around town. I always tell guests I would love for you to see a bear, but not when you're running away from it on foot. So yeah. But it is true that most of the doors in Churchill are unlocked. And it is a very low crime rate here, but that's also, of course, a safety thing as well.
Although the possibility of encountering a polar bear was both intriguing and utterly terrifying, we only had 2 nights here, so we needed to get focused and give ourselves the best possible chance of seeing the Northern Lights. A tour operator that would take us away from the lights of the town seemed like the best option at this point. Hey Courtney, I'm just ringing to get booked in on the Nights Under Lights tour for tonight. But with a not so favourable aurora forecast and poor weather conditions, our hopes of actually seeing the lights were fading pretty fast. As night descended, our tour operator arrived to pick us up. Now the weather had cleared a little, but the full moon that loomed overhead was flagged as a potential issue by our tour operator Dave.
It doesn't affect their activity, it might affect their luminosity. You know, they might not be as bright if the full moon's out.
Walking into the Earth, I'd say there was a massive sense of excitement, because everybody thought, is this going to be the night that we actually see the Northern Lights? Now I didn't really believe that we would, if I'm being honest, but I always had hope.
I'm Dave, this is what I look like when I'm not in the dark. This is what I look like without a hat. My hair's probably flattened.
For the next few hours we braved the cold and snow, searching the night sky for any sign of an aurora. But unfortunately all we seen was darkness. Feeling pretty deflated, we went back to the Earth to warm up. It was at this stage that we started to hear some pretty loud rustling noises coming from the forest outside. Our tour guide assured us it was probably just a squirrel, but the gun that was now on his shoulder made us really question that statement. After the rustling ended, we made our way back to the bus and we did see an aurora cloud, but we were expecting to see the dazzling displays of the Northern Lights, so to see just a faint cloud in the sky, it was pretty uninspiring and it was really a shadow of what we'd hoped for. When we realised that this would be our last night in Churchill, I think it definitely did add an element of pressure. We'd obviously spent a lot of time planning the trip, and then a lot of money was spent as well to get to Churchill, so the thoughts that we would have to go home without actually seeing what we'd gone there to see, it definitely added a lot of stress. Now, one of the amazing things about travel is seeing new places and learning about new things, but we'd spent so much time looking for ways to see the Northern Lights that we hadn't actually seen a lot of the other things that Churchill has to offer. So with that in mind, we decided to leave the stress behind for a little while and go to Polar Bears International. Polar Bears International is a non-profit organisation with a focus on polar bear conservation. Their international team is made up of conservationists, scientists and volunteers who all work to secure a future for the polar bears across the Arctic.
The global population of polar bears is actually split into 19 subunits, what we call subpopulations. And this is based off
The organisation works to inspire people to care about the Arctic, the threats to its future, and its connection to our global climate. As our friendly host Louise educated us on the Arctic and the uncertain futures that these polar bears faced, she spoke repeatedly about hope, about the hope that things could get better, the hope that people would realise that it's not too late to change the future of the Arctic, and the hope that these bears can have a future. And so even though this was our last night in Churchill, we still had hope. So we booked another tour to go to the Aurora Domes. With literally hours left in Churchill, we travelled out to the countryside for one last chance to catch a glimpse of the aurora. The conditions for the night looked promising. And although we hoped for a positive outcome, we couldn't quite shake the feeling that this wasn't going to happen.
You can actually stand upright when you get inside the domes.
Over the last few days, we began to question if the long trip to Churchill was actually worth it. We'd failed in our main goal, and sitting in the dome in that moment, we began to realise that the trip wasn't just about seeing the Northern Lights. It was about the adventure, the challenge and the camaraderie. It was about the life experience. In one of the coldest places on the planet, we've been embraced by the warmth of a community. We accepted that the dream of seeing the Northern Lights was over. But then something truly amazing happened. In the face of the unpredictable and the uncontrollable, we discovered the power of hope.